Oh, it's very exciting to be here in Geneva. I've never been to Switzerland before. I also discovered that my great-grandmother was French-Swiss, and I thought she was from Lausanne. But then I found out the day before I left that she's actually from Rolle. I'm going to have a tour of a very small part of Switzerland before I come back and do the whole thing. But it looks beautiful. I've had a lovely time. Thank you. Barnaby is... I think he's quite clever and quite suspicious. I've always thought he's very interested in people. I think he didn't know much about the countryside or country life. And I think he was a bit suspicious of that. But gradually, I think he came to love it and to enjoy the eccentricity of the people who live in the country. Because the thing I always loved about Midsomer, even before I was in it, is that everybody's got something to hide. So everybody lies to the police, but only usually one person is lying about being a murderer. And so I think he finds that trying to figure out what people are, what are you, is this true that you're telling me? Or you want me to think this? Or, that's interesting. I wonder why, I'll take that away and think about that. And it's like every episode, I think he's doing a big jigsaw puzzle. He gets a little... There's nothing, and then you get the first piece, and it's usually a body, and you think, and then, well, let's go and see that person and that person and that person and find out that and talk about that. And it all doesn't make sense. And then there's usually a point in most episodes where something happens. His wife says something to him, or something happens, and he goes, and then he's figured it out. Yes, it's aha moment. Aha! I see. And he's very, also, I think he's very kind of circumspect. So he doesn't rush to conclusions. If something seems a bit obvious, he doesn't necessarily think, that means that. He thinks, okay, well, maybe that piece goes there, or maybe it goes somewhere else. I think he's all those kinds of things, yes. Which I like. They're always fun to play with as an actor. They're fun to play around with that thinking and that puzzlement and that uncertainty. And also, I think importantly, he's very loyal as well. He gets very attached to his sergeant, and they have a very close and quite, sometimes I hope, sort of humorous relationship. Strangely, I think he's not very sort of judgmental. I think he takes everybody as human beings as he finds them, so he can be quite rude to the Lord of the Manor and quite deferential and respectful to somebody very low down. Or he sort of makes up his own rules as to how he treats people, depending on how he thinks they deserve to be treated as people. When I took over as in the Barnaby part, when it was first mentioned to me, I think I just had quite a strong idea of what it should be, because I'd always genuinely been a big fan of the show. I'd always loved watching the show. A very important thing about Midsomer, I always thought, is the tone of it. It's got to be kind of real and a real serious whodunit, but obviously it has things in it that are quite eccentric and quite extreme and quite odd. But there wasn't really very much, there wasn't a big difference. It wasn't like the show changed. An analogy I sort of like to use, which maybe means more to English people, is in cricket. It's still very interesting to me, sort of how much you can do while staying within the idea that he's kind of the sensible one, the boring one in midfield who just sort of passes the ball around and keeps things moving along, but doesn't often do anything very sort of spectacular. In a lot of police shows, you'll have a first series that's great, everybody likes that. And then the second series, that's very interesting, and you da-da-da. And then in the third series, they kind of go, don't know what to do now. Why don't we have that it's the policeman's wife who's kidnapped, and and then it all starts becoming about the policeman and his family, and you think, it was sort of about the criminals and the crimes, and now you've made it about your star, the lead actor and his family. And there's never really any of that in Midsomer, which was a part of the initial idea 25 years ago when it was created, is that there were also kind of maverick policemen who have a drink problem and a broken marriage, and they are always fighting with their bosses. And the people who created Midsomer thought, Oh, that's why I'm sick of that. Why don't we just have a policeman who sort of likes his job, has a nice wife and family, and it's all great, and he gets up in the morning and he goes and he solves murders, and he comes home and pats the dog and sees his wife, and he's just a sort of normal working guy. It doesn't have to be this tormented genius kind of figure. It's not about Barnaby. It's about the guests and the stories and the characters who come in. I don't know whether people like it, but it's 12 years later and I'm still here, so... If I had to say, what is Midsomer most basically about? So just something happens in a rural location and 2 police officers go to investigate. And that's it, really. If you can make sense of it and justify it and make it entertaining and fun, you can kind of do anything within that because it's so loose. So I think the thing about how does it renew itself for 23 years is it's never really the same show twice. It changes almost completely from one episode to the next. Again, I think you can be very moving, you can be very dark, you can be rather frightening, you can be a bit silly, you can be quite eccentric. It's a very hard thing to say, to sort of limit it down to, it's Midsommer's this or this, which means you've got this endless variety within something that people know and go back to and think, what's it going to be this week? What amazing story have they come up with this week? I love that where a writer kind of paints themselves into a corner and you think, there's no way out of this. You've shown a UFO crashing in the woods. You can't make sense of that because it doesn't happen. It's never happened. You can't see it. And then they find a little path out of it and you go, oh, that's really clever. That's great. So the things that I would like for Barnaby in the future, I suppose, are the more you see a case and you go, what on earth is happening here? This can't happen. This is insane. This is crazy. He's completely confused, can't make any sense of it. And then gradually you go, oh, In Midsomer, you think, no, this isn't bizarre. Think of something much, much more bizarre than that and then find a way of fitting it into Midsomer, and you can do that. You can't, with a lot of other shows, you can't really do that. You have to stay within the rules that you've set yourself. Midsomer doesn't really have any rules. So we can as long as we can make it believable in our own terms, we can do whatever we want. So it can be UFOs or the end of the world or whatever. More of that, please, yeah.